Today we are going to learn about a powerful grammar tool called adjective clauses, which help you add rich detail to your sentences. We will cover what they are, the signal words they use, and how to punctuate them correctly. To start off, have you ever heard of an adjective clause before?
I have heard of adjectives before, like words that describe things, but I am not really sure what makes one a clause. Is it just a really long adjective or something like that?
You are on the right track. It acts just like a long adjective because its whole job is to describe a noun. Specifically, a clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb to give that extra detail. For example, in the phrase, "the student who studies hard," which part do you think is describing the student?
I think the part that says who studies hard is the description. But I am a bit confused because you said a clause needs a subject and a verb. In that part, studies is the action, but who is the subject? It feels more like a question word than a person.
In these clauses, the word who actually acts as the subject while also connecting the description to the student. It is like a bridge that both points to the person and does the action of studying in that mini-sentence. To build these descriptions, we use special signal words like who, which, or that. Do you know which of those we should use if we are talking about an object instead of a person?
I think you would use which or that if you were talking about a thing. Like, if I was talking about a car, I would say the car that is red. Does that mean the word that is acting as the subject of the description there?
Exactly. In your example, that acts as the subject for the description of the car. Now that you have those down, there are a few more specific relative words we use, like whose to show someone owns something, or where and when for places and times. If you were describing a specific year, like 2020, which of those signal words would you use to start your description?
I guess I would use when, since 2020 is a time. So I could say something like 2020 was the year when everything changed. But I was wondering, can you use that for times too? Like, the year that everything changed? Or does it have to be when?
You actually can use that for times in many cases, though when is often more specific. That is a very versatile connector that works for both people and things. Now that we have covered the signal words, let's look at the two types of adjective clauses, starting with defining clauses. These are essential because they tell us exactly which person or thing we are talking about. Like in the sentence, "The students who study regularly get good grades."
So in that sentence about the students, does that mean if I took the who study regularly part out, the sentence wouldn't make sense anymore? Or is it just that we wouldn't know which specific students you were talking about?
You hit the nail on the head. The sentence would still be grammatically correct, but we wouldn't know which specific group of students you meant. Since that information is essential to identify the subject, we call it a defining clause, and we don't use any commas around it.
Oh, okay, so no commas for the important stuff. But what happens if the information is just like a side note or extra detail? Like if I already named the person, would I still need to keep the clause attached without commas? Like if I said my friend Josh, who is a great cook, made dinner. Since you already know I am talking about Josh, does that change the punctuation?
You are spot on. Since we already know specifically who Josh is, the fact that he is a great cook is just extra information, so we wrap it in commas. This is called a non-defining clause, and there is one special rule for these. You can never use the word that to start them. Knowing this, if you were describing your house, which is blue, how would you write that out using commas?
I would write it like, my house, which is blue, is on the corner. Since I said it is my house, I guess you already know which one it is, so the blue part is just extra. Wait, if I can't use the word that for those extra parts, does that mean I can only use which if I am talking about an object in a non-defining clause? Like, would it be wrong to say my house, that is blue, is on the corner?
Correct. Using that in that sentence would be grammatically wrong, because that is only for defining clauses without commas. To make sure you have this down, what is the main difference in how we use commas between a defining and a non-defining clause?
So if the information is defining, like it's totally necessary to know which thing we're talking about, we don't use any commas at all. But if it's just extra trivia, like the part about your friend Josh, we have to put commas around it. It's almost like the commas are showing that you could just lift that part out of the sentence and still know exactly who or what is being discussed. Is that right?
That is a perfect explanation. You have a great handle on when to use those commas and when to skip them. Now that we have covered the types and punctuation, let's look at a simple three-step check to identify these clauses in the wild. First, you find a noun, then look for a relative word right after it, and finally ask yourself if that whole chunk of words describes the noun.
That makes sense. So if I'm looking at a sentence like, the book which I borrowed is lost, I'd first look at book since it's the noun. Then the relative word is which, and the whole part about me borrowing it tells you which book it is. But I'm a little confused about the subject and verb thing again. In that sentence, I is the subject and borrowed is the verb. Does that mean the relative word which isn't the subject this time? Or can there be two subjects inside the clause?
That is a very sharp observation. In this case, I is indeed the subject of the clause, and which acts as the object, representing the book you borrowed. So while a relative word can be the subject, it can also just be the bridge that connects the noun to a new subject and verb.
Oh, I think I get it now. So the relative word like which can either be the one doing the action, or it can just be pointing back to the noun while someone else does the action. Is that why sometimes I hear people leave the word out entirely? Like, if I said the book I borrowed is lost, without saying which, is it still an adjective clause if the signal word isn't even there?
Yes, it is still an adjective clause. In many defining clauses where the relative word is the object, like your example, you can omit the signal word and the description still works perfectly. Since we have covered the definition, the signal words, the types, and how to identify them, can you summarize the three-step test you would use to spot an adjective clause in a sentence?
Okay, so for the three-step test, first I would look for the person or thing being talked about, which is the noun. Then, I'd check if there is one of those signal words right after it, like who or which, even if it's sometimes invisible. Finally, I'd see if that entire group of words is actually acting like a description for that noun. Does that sound right?
That is a perfect summary of the three-step guide. You have successfully mastered the core concepts of how these clauses function and how to punctuate them. Since we have explored how to build, punctuate, and identify these descriptive tools, you are now ready to use them to make your own writing much more detailed. It has been a pleasure walking through this with you.
Wait, before we finish, I have one more quick question. I was thinking about the word whose that you mentioned earlier, for when someone owns something. If I use that, does it follow the same comma rules we talked about? Like, would I say the boy whose bike was stolen is crying without commas, but my brother whose bike was stolen is crying with commas? I just want to make sure I'm using the ownership one correctly, too.
You nailed it! The comma rules for whose work exactly like the others, depending on whether the information is essential to identify the person or just an extra detail. Before we wrap up, can you tell me the one signal word you should never use when you have those extra information commas?
Oh, that would be the word that. I have to remember to use which or who instead if I am using those commas for the extra details, since that is only for the really important, defining parts of the sentence, right?
Exactly. You have absolutely mastered the rules for adjective clauses, from identifying them to using the correct punctuation. It has been great seeing you connect all these pieces together so clearly. Thanks for a fun and engaging session today.